Hi, my name is Benedict. This video is kind of a follow-on from a couple of videos that I've done recently. The first one about AI and how we're allowing ourselves to be fooled with this. The second one, can't remember what it's about. I'll pop them up in here. Anyway, that's what's important. What's important is that this one is about fear. And fear is a massive problem that I see. People don't want to see it as fear. They see it as like some sort of technical thing. Oh, if only I had such and such a synthesizer or such and such a pro technique, then I'd be able to get somewhere. And you know what? That's wrong. It really is wrong. I grew up with some of this. I'm even going to show you some of my fear in action through this. But wherever I am, when I look around groups, forums, what have you, people, clients, students, what have you, the biggest problem they have is not actually technical. It's definitely nothing to do with their gear or lack thereof. It's all to do with fear. And that's really sad because it's an overcomable thing. But when you're looking in the wrong direction, the fear itself actually feeds itself and creates a bigger problem, whilst telling you otherwise. As you see, no door open here at all. This isn't about music per se. You are not going to be told which button to press to have Grammy Award hits. I never do that kind of garbage in the first place. So if you are here looking for that, either you're in the wrong place or you're in exactly the right place for actually being able to move past what's really bothering you, which is not the buttons in your door or lack thereof. So overall, fear of the dark. Fear of the dark is a concept that we all kind of get, but we don't necessarily stop to understand why. What's in the dark? There's nothing in the dark that isn't there when we turn the light on. And yet, for some reason, we become as soon as the light goes off. But we don't really stop to be rational about it. And this is a really important thing, that we will then find ways to rationalize ourselves out of what might be quite rational. Turn on the light and we can see everything that's there and nothing is problematic. We rationalize it by saying, oh, well, they're invisible. Or, oh, well, they hide under the bed or in the cupboard when the light goes on. Yeah, cockroaches do that. But we're able to find the factual evidence of cockroaches, including the fact that when you turn the light on, there are still cockroaches going, which way do I run? Which means cockroaches are there non-stop. And while they're not comfortable for us, they are a fact in which we can deal with them. But when we create fears that aren't actually real, of course we can't deal with them. And those fears will then find ways to perpetuate themselves. And in perpetuating themselves and us trying to fight with them, they just get bigger and bigger and bigger. They become more insidious. First thing, let's look at the history or perhaps the anthropology of fear. Now, I'm not a scientist, and nor am I approaching this in hard science, but applying a logical argument. Fear has good and bad sides. There are good things about fear. Fear stops us from walking off a cliff. Fear stops us from walking up to a lion and putting our heads in its mouth to sort of say, oh, what's it like in here? Because those are unwise things. They are probably going to end up with dead Benedicts. So it's better not to do those things, or to do those things with extreme caution. That's a good side of fear. But there's a bad side to fear as well. If you have not watched it, the first movie, The Croods, it's an animated with cave people, and the father in particular lives in a huge amount of fear. And ultimately the movie's about saying we've got to overcome that kind of fear. I think that most people who watch it don't ever really think about the message, or if they do, they go, oh, isn't that cute, and then forget about it. They allow their fears to overwhelm them. Again, understandable, but a shame. The downside of fear, anthropologically or historically, is that we might say, ooh, there are tigers out there. If I go outside of my cave, then I'm going to be attacked by a tiger and eaten. we can justify that as being a good fear, because obviously if you don't go outside, you know you're never going to be eaten by tigers. Brilliant! Logic seems insurmountable. The other side that is not considered by that poor argument is that if you don't go outside of the cave, you aren't going to get any food, because caves don't have taps with hot and cold running food. This isn't Star Trek. Therefore, you must go outside of the cave to get more food. But irrational fear doesn't actually tell you that. It doesn't deal with that. So we've got to be aware. Fear is a thing that will say, hey, is that really the best thing to do? Or should we be more cautious about that? But the kind of fear we really need to deal with is the fear that allows us to justify never moving, never going outside of the cave, never getting food, therefore a 150% guaranteed death. If I go outside of the cave, I might get eaten by a tiger. Even if that was 70% chance of being eaten by a tiger, you've still got a 30% chance of surviving, of living, at least for one more day, because you captured a rabbit or something or other. But of course, the odds of being eaten by a tiger at any given point in time are actually surprisingly small. The chances of being eaten by anything at any given point in time are surprisingly small. We know this without having to actually get into heavy science, simply because most people live. But we don't act that way. Because we spend so much time justifying hiding, we have now gotten ourselves, and through various other social things like social media, the rise of AI, and all the things that are tied to it, that we would rather be lied to. We have put ourselves in a situation where we now live gripped by fear. These are all song titles, if you haven't worked that out. I would have hoped you would have by now. Society now rewards fear more than it rewards going out and actually finding food. It's now more socially acceptable to say I am fearful than it is to actually go out there and do stuff. You get more pats on the back on social media for talking about your neuroses than you do for actually going out and doing things. This is disturbing. It's morally wrong. It's morally reprehensible. But the reason that we do this is that fear is backing itself. And so now we have the massive rise of a whole lot of ways of sheltering inside our fears. We'll run through some of the ways in which we hide. I've written about a lot of these on my website. A few of these are extracted from articles. Go find them. They're under tutorials. Just go to the website. Link will be below. Press tutorials, and then you will find them in there. They're generally in the second section on business type stuff, which is talking about mindset. The first one is a character I created called Gena Green. Gena Green has talent. Gena Green had the opportunity to go on stage with another person, and if she had done that, then there was somebody in the audience who was going to be really impressed and sign her. This is all made up. But Gena decided not to do that, because the guy that she was going to go on stage with and whose songs she was going to sing to support him just wrote sappy love songs. Oh, I love you. And, they were good songs and all of that. They were good enough to get signed, and they would have been success. Her name would have been all over it because she was the one flapping her gums. But Gena lived in fear. She was like, I can't do that. Gena had bought into this sort of social idea, and assuming that she wasn't good enough for just singing love songs, she had attached a whole ball of wax around this. And so she created this idea that she was here for all kinds of political aims around supporting women and green this, that, and the other, hence her dubious name. And so rather than actually going to this show, which, unbeknownst to everybody, would have resulted in her being signed and having a good, successful career, she would have had her versions of I Will Always Love You, and great. She would have made a lot of people happy and actually met her real goals of helping the world be a happier place. She went and chained herself to a tree and waved a flag and got herself on the news. In doing so, made herself so unwell from exposure, not to mention being in prison for a little bit, that despite the fact she got a little bit famous on the news, she was so unwell she couldn't perform for a year. So she missed that gig that would have got her signed, and missed her ability to do her job for a year. The real issue is that she decided that she would be noble, and she added all kinds of layers of fear, which masqueraded themselves as good. Oh, well, I'm going to be noble. I'm going to fight this thing and... You know what? It was BS. It was all self-serving, fearful BS. A love song well delivered is generally more powerful than any political song. Want to question that? Okay. Great love songs tend to stay on the radio way longer than protest songs. That doesn't mean I don't admire a good protest song when they're well done. There's some magic to that. The reason that Geldof's and Mitchell's We Are the World, the Christmas song, does so well as A, it was tied to Christmas, but B, it's actually a love song far more than a protest song. Think on that one. I'm not going to dig into that any further, but think on that. That's why that works so incredibly well and has become a perennial A, Christmas, and B, it's a love song. So the danger with the Gena Green approach is that we actually start going in the wrong direction. Another version of the Gena Green story is if we replace the flag-waving environmentalism, what have you, with genreism. I have to write this exact genre, or I'm not. Who gives a flying banana peel? Things that really matter, someone applies a genre after the fact. I Will Always Love You was actually originally a country song written by the venerable Dolly Parton. It came more famous as various other people did it, and then under Celine, I think it is, as just a broad rock pop song. So it's had lives in different genres. In other words, that tells us that the genre that it's in is actually pretty irrelevant, and that the song can still work regardless of genre. If Gena had stayed focused on her true message of bringing people together and making the world a better place, rather than all the flag-waving stuff or obsession with genre, then she would have gotten further faster. As it is, her obsession, her fears that she justified in various external ways actually killed her career. Another article is on how fish behave. Group of fish, they get scared, what do? They rush into a ball. And while there's a certain logic to it, once we step outside of that, we realise that it's really pretty flawed logic. The logic of that is that if the fish are threatened by sharks, or particularly by things that herd them, like dolphins, because dolphins are pretty gluey, what happens is that they rush into a ball, and because they're always constantly rushing into the centre of the ball goes round and round, and fish work towards the centre, meaning that other fish are pushed to the outside. The logic being that if I'm pushing to the centre, there are billions of other fish around me. The odds of me being snapped up by the shark reduce dramatically. Okay, on the surface, sounds like brilliant logic. Really does. The problem with that, and that dolphins have really worked out, is that if you keep going at the fishbowl for long enough, there are virtually no fish left. In other words, that poor logic means that just about every fish gets eaten. That's not good. That's back up with the cave person who says, I'm going to stay in the cave because it guarantees I never get eaten by a lion, assuming lions never go in caves, which might be a reasonable assumption. But it 100% guarantees that everyone in that cave dies, at least until they get to the point of going, yeah, it's probably better to brave the lion than die here. So the fishbowl, while it creates a solution, it means that there has to be an awful lot more fish because so many of them get eaten by going into a ball. If we want to be successful in something, anything, going into a ball can have its advantages. But if you're trying to stand out, which, being a musician, you have to stand out, Then going into the fishbowl is the stupidest place you could be. The fishbowl is the equivalent of obsession with genre and asking for approval. As long as we're asking for approval, we're looking to hide. You can't hide and be successful. When you think of Bob Dylan, do you think of someone who's hiding? No, he's proudly out there with his dubious haircut and even worse, singing. But a powerful message. I've got nothing against the Bobster. The Bobster's great, but I'm just trying to be super blunt. Rod Stewart, ghastly voice, wonderful singer. Is there anything about Rod Stewart that says hiding? No, not at all. Completely the opposite. Robbie Williams, Erasure. Is there anything about any of these artists that says hiding? Not at all. The ones that matter are not hiding. Iron Maiden may very rarely be on their album covers, but there's nothing about the Iron Maiden experience that says hiding. Everything about the Iron Maiden experience says courage. Courage to do this. Courage to be who we are. Courage to just live another day. So the fishbowl is another way of justifying that, our fear is good and we can hide in this cave and we'll be safe. Yes, safe from success. Another version that has become more apparent recently, and social media has driven this, is that we set impossible goals. I might put the picture up, I might not. The article is there. And there's a picture with two ladders. One of them has a step, which is right here, and then a step right up there, which is like amazeballs success. And it's targeted and dated as tomorrow. That in some way, that the best goal, the best way to do this, the only way to be successful is to step from here to superstardom instantly, overnight. What kind of insanity is that? But it's a safe insanity because it means, A, we don't actually have to do any work. That somehow magically we'll blip from here to there. And Billie Eilish, her whole mythology that was built around her was of exactly that. There have been quite a few of those, instant superstars. Most of them disappear pretty darn fast. But the reality, when you look into the Billie Eilish story of the Eilish family and all the work that was done to get her to this amazing immediate overnight success, is far from immediate, far from overnight. There's a lot of work, a lot of maneuvering inside there. But they sold the fantasy of that. And social media loves that kind of fantasy because people can latch onto that fantasy and say it's going to happen for me. So when you look around, you see so many people going, I don't feel like I can compete in my real life the way I am, so I will just do this thing that'll blip me to there. That's like the cave person sitting in their cave, starving, saying, I couldn't possibly go out because I might be eaten by tigers, but maybe if I strike these two rocks together, or maybe if I wave this feather, that I will end up with a Star Trek food replicator up here and it'll magically just give me food forever. Manna from the gods. Even if such a thing ever becomes possible, 3D printing our food, that's edible, it still relies on a whole lot of sciencey stuff, technology underneath it to operate. So we must never set impossible goals. Impossible goals are fear's way of allowing us to justify that we're doing something special, exactly the same as Gena Green with I'm going to wave my flag and it proves how noble I am, whilst doing absolutely nothing, whilst sitting in our cave and starving. If you find that you are falling into any of the, I've got these amazing noble goals, as I said to a friend just the other day, if I set my goals as marry Kylie Minogue after I solve world peace, I've set myself up to fail. It may seem incredibly noble, and I can tell everybody how noble I am for I'm going to solve world peace and then Kylie Minogue will marry me. Sounds good, sounds impressive, but it also sounds completely insane, logically. Because if world peace were easily solvable, then it would have solved itself. World peace isn't solved itself because people don't want world peace. That may be sad, but it's true. As for Kylie Minogue, well, that's not going to happen. So setting myself up with those kinds of goals means that I am no longer willing or able to look at what is around me. I'm just sitting in the dark in a cave, starving. Impossible goals might seem noble, but they're a way of hiding in our cave or in our fishbowl. Put all these together along with various other things, like there's so much social fear and reward for that, as I talked about before, that we end up developing these kind of paranoid personalities. Thank you, Alice Cooper, who's an absolute master of pointing these things at. Good on you, old ugly white dude. That we are taught to fear so much and to focus so much on our fears and on our failings. So we flag wave. We say, I am such and such a something or other. I've guessed that I am probably on the autism spectrum. I do very little to talk about that. Why? Because it doesn't change anything. Yes, it might mean that I behave a certain way, but it's not like I used to behave differently before the autism thing suddenly happened to me. It wasn't like I got hit by an autism bus. If I am on the autism spectrum or not, the thing is, this is just Benedict. These are the cards that I was dealt. If I'm going to whine about it constantly and run a flag up the pole saying I need to be treated special because I'm special and special snowflake myself, all I'm doing is hiding in fear. There are plenty of people on the autism spectrum, known for fact, who are really successful. Therefore, it's not an impediment. It gives me certain advantages. Many mix engineers are actually on the autism spectrum. Many very successful record producers, and I mean record producers, I don't mean beat makers. Mutt Lange of the Cars, the Cause, and Shania Twiddly fame. And of course AC/DC and Def Leppard. This guy, he's like a screaming poster child. But his strengths is what he's traded on, not his weaknesses or his fears. So we've also got to be aware that the three things that I brought up before, the Gena Green example, the fishbowl, the impossible goals, these all turn into, when we are living in a society that's gripped by fear, the paranoic personality syndrome. And that people fall into this paranoid personality syndrome because it gives them this wonderful, safe place to hide, in which they can wave flags and appear very noble or victimized, which we've taught people that being a victim is the noblest thing you can be. I don't want to be a victim. We're all victim of circumstance, victim of changes. Oh, great, that's another rock thing. I'm going to have to put up a Judas Priest cover now. Any opportunity to put up Judas Priest covers. This is stupid. This is messed up. There's no win in that at all, other than the short-term win of continual feedback from our society that's gripped by fear, telling us how great we are for having a paranoid personality. I'm going to show you an example now of this all in action, and it's a very personal example. Happened to me, I did this just the other day. In being frustrated because work is diminishing, I went on Upwork, and I looked and I saw this. This is a kind of job I would normally just kick to the curb, but I didn't. Let's look at this in two stages. Let's look at their fear, as in what the red flags are that are shown in this job, and then let's look at my fear in how I actually reacted to this compared to how I should have reacted to this job. I need 2 vocal stems mixed into 1 instrumental stem, please. Okay, seems alright, but it's a little aggressive from the get-go. But then he changes his facts. He's given 1 set of facts which make it seem small, but then he modifies his facts, divided into 4. There were 4 vocal lines here. That's the fact. There were 4 vocal lines. His main lead for his chorus and a secondary, like a backing. Great. And then there were 2 other sections, each which had a voice track. How they got there, whether they were compiled, don't care. There were 4 tracks, so why did he present it as 2? That's sneaky, that's fear. I want the mix to sound pleasurable to listen to on repeat. soft on the ears despite the fact that I'm singing loud. He's obsessed with telling us how fearful he is about his singing. Now, the reality was his singing was better than most at this level. I mean, this is a level 0 client. He tells us this. But it was actually quite good, which is part of the reason that I fell for going further with this than I should have. Isn't it self-evident? So why would you need to say this? I need to be approved of by Spotify or the great masses. I need the fishbowl to approve of me. But at the same time, I'm going to set impossible goals here. I know that I'm not great, but I'm going to set impossible goals for you and for myself of being able to be the equal of Taylor Swift or Beyonce or whoever or whatever fishbowl you're chasing here. This then gets scarier. Please don't tell me about who you are personally. Whoa, why does this guy not want to create a relationship with anybody else? Not just me personally, but with anybody. He's saying, I don't want to create relationships with anybody. That's a massive amount of fear here. In the fishbowl, fish aren't actually communicating with each other. They're all just going, get the fuck out of my way because the shark's somewhere near. Out of my way, out of my way, out of my way, because they're always pushing to the center to hide from the eyeball of the shark. They're actually sacrificing all the other fish. They're saying, throw you towards the shark. There you go, sharky, catch that one, so that you're not noticing me. This is really fearful stuff. And so he says, all you got to do is not tell me anything about yourself. So he's depersonalizing everybody. This tells us how he's depersonalized himself, that he doesn't want to show his true self here at all. The song is trying to be about, oh, I'm showing myself, but all the song is about is fear. I can't show you the song. I wish I could. I did the work. But I'm not allowed to show it legally because it gets to very, very tricky territory. It gets frustrating because I want to hear what you've got, what amazeballs things you're going to do for me, but I don't want to hear anything about you. That's an absolute fuck you. But he puts that with confidence, with arrogance, with saying, this puts me in control of the situation. And you know what? It kind of did, until it didn't. Blah, blah, blah. And then he says, he will not accept any proposals unless a sample is sent. So in other words, you need to mix this for free. You need to show me your outcome for free before I'll even consider you. Again, that says I'm not going to do any my due diligence as somebody who's hiring. I'm not going to take any time to get to know who you are, what your quality of work is. You're just going to send me this finished job. I'm then going to look at the first so many proposals that come in and decide which one I cherry pick. So in other words, 10 to 50 people are going to do this job, complete it, and then one of them maybe is going to get hired. I don't know whether you've bothered reading to the bottom to see what he's going to pay for this, but that is the essence of wrong. Absolutely wrong. He wants everyone to come to him. Why? Because he lives in overwhelming fear, and therefore he has set himself up into this paranoic personality of a special snowflake who deserves to depersonalize, de-everything, to neuter everything and everybody around him. This is what fear encourages us to do. Just send me of your sample and I'll decide if I like it. And then more about this, I'm shouting and it still needs to sound good when it's at full volume. And then some more instructions based upon his supposed knowledge of music. He didn't know anything about music. I can tell you, it was a pre-made beat, which was pre-mixed and pre-mastered, which is like rookie error number 1. It didn't have a proper arrangement. It was just ABC, 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 end. He was trying to pretend that he was several genres like rock, emo, and trap. It was just trap. And that's okay. I kind of saw some positives in what he'd done. Then, of course, he wants an expert, and he's willing to pay $20, fixed price, total. So $20 minus 2 means that the person who does this job, assuming they win it, which is a 1 in 50 chance at best, and there's a fair chance that what he will do is simply take one of the things that somebody has sent, because a lot of people will be too fearful to actually send their work in any way tagged, watermarked, or to make it impossible to be used. So chances are he'll hire nobody, which I know is what happened in the end, and all those people will do the work and no one will get paid, and probably he'll be out there using one of those people's work. I know it won't be mine simply because I had the courage, audacity, whatever, to actually make my work unusable. It sounds great, but I put a section in the middle, which means that it couldn't go on radio. He couldn't just use my work unpaid, which was probably a way of guaranteeing I didn't get the job, but whoever got the job probably didn't get paid. But assuming they did, an expert mixing a song, okay, it's 4 vocal parts and a music bed, that requires work. I had to work out how to get these vocals to actually fit with the music bed because they didn't really. I mean, yeah, you could put them there and say, oh yeah, they fit, but that's more wishful thinking than actually do they fit nicely. That's a lot of work. That was 2 to 3 hours work on my part to make that work nicely. At a point where I would say, that's work I'm proud of. So that puts $6 an hour. What professional works for $6 an hour, let alone an expert? So there are a lot of things on his side that show massive, overwhelming fear, and that he uses that to create this paranoic personality that he then allows himself to force onto other people. Nobody got this job, and I'm not sure why. I'm not sure whether Upwork took a single unusual step to actually follow their rules and cancel this job, or whether he got a mix that he liked and then cancelled the job. But interestingly enough, I actually got my connects back. Connects being the things you have to pay to apply for a job. So round 2 is, what was my fear that I actually allowed myself to get involved with this kind of thing? Is red flags all over the place. I haven't even stopped to count how many there are, but there are 5, 6, 7, maybe 10 red flags. This is a really messed up situation. So why did I allow myself to get into it? Well, it is fear of the dark. Is like, well, nothing else is happening. I can't manage to land anything. To be perfectly blunt, basically all my clients have walked away. And fear is the reason that I see that they have walked away. It's nothing to do with what I've done or done wrong. It's just they're afraid of going ahead and doing things, and they don't want to invest in themselves. It's hard work doing this properly. Go ask any band. Go ask Alice when she's 10 feet tall. Go ask Iron Maiden. Go ask Front 242. Go ask Tears for Fears. How much work does it take to get anywhere in this business, let alone to be as successful as these bands are/have been? And they would just shake their heads and go, fuck me if I'd known. I would have just taken up being a plumber. But they're driven and they have reached the pinnacle of their craft, their mastery. They've done super well, which is how I've chosen them to be here, representing the stages of this. So I took this really stupidly. I blinded myself to all the red flags. I tried to be like, oh, well, I bought into his paranoid personality syndrome and allowed it to happen. It's like, oh, well, he means well. Oh, I quite like what he's done. It was drivel, actually. Self-indulgent twaddle about, oh, poor pitiful me. I deserve better. Oh, my mum's the only chick that digs me. Yeah, not surprising, you dipshit. When you talk to people this way, it's not surprising. I'm surprised your mum even still likes you anymore with this. This is reprehensible. So why did I actually go into it? Because I was afraid that, oh, well, there's nothing happening. Oh, well, maybe if I'm noble. Maybe if that's the Gena Green thing. Maybe if I do the noble thing. Maybe if I do this, then I will get lucky. That's the impossible goals. Okay, it's impossible. I can't remember how many people had applied, but it was probably at least 20 to 50 according to Upwork's measurement, which means tons of people. Once people go past about 5 to 10 people having applied for their job, they simply stop reading. the new proposals. They could get an application from the best person in the universe, not even just the best person on earth, but they won't even read it because they've got sick of seeing all this stuff, as we see from this idiot here. Is wants to depersonalize so that he can move through people faster. He can move through the work people have done faster without having to weigh himself down about feeling bad about treating people poorly. So I did it. He did include his stems, and that was a thing that seemed good, and it is good. A client should present them, but he presented them because he expected the work done, and he knew that suckers like me would probably fall for it. In the Gena Green thing of going, oh well, I'll be noble and maybe I'll get lucky because I'm good, because I'm better than most. I'll stand out. So I did it, and I thought, this is going to be pretty fast. But yeah, about 3 hours work, all up, was done. I then sent this. Of course, I heard nothing until I realised that he'd looked at the job, because I get Upwork shows that he's looked at the job, and then next thing I know, job is canned. I got my connects back, which makes me think that maybe Upwork said this is not a fair job, because otherwise if he'd just canned it, then maybe they don't come back. But it's impenetrable to understand what Upwork does, because they have rules they don't follow, and they never tell you what they're really doing, because they're not following their rules, that's for sure. The fact that he said expert, that flattered my ego, that flattered the stupidity of me. It's like, oh, well, he's just a battler trying to do it, trying to get there. And because of his weepy song, oh, I'm just trying to find my place, I'm just trying to, I fell for all of that BS. And I sent it off thinking, oh, well, maybe I can win. And I even had thoughts that, oh, well, maybe I can just still use the work that I've done anyway. But I can't. I had a conversation with somebody who has some legal training, and they said that while you may be able to try to build some sort of thing, you're going to battle and you're going to lose, I guess, especially against someone like YouTube who simply says, oh, well, there's been a copyright strike. Because the thing was, the client never approved my work. I said, but it's a competition. It's a public competition. When you read this, it's a public competition. And I was thinking I'd probably post this in there to show this is a competition, therefore. But they said, well, because it's not actually, you technically you could probably try to raise some sort of argument, but ultimately you're going to get canned. And that'll go against you. So it was like, again, that fantasy of I can build something from it regardless was just stupid. This is how we get sucked into this world of gripped by fear that builds a paranoid personality that encourages us to do stupid things for others. So this is showing you how fear gets in the way. Oh, the fear of, oh, I'll never be heard. Maybe at least I can be heard if I do this. I've done so much of that work. Have I been heard? No. All the mixed walkthroughs that I've done, have they ever resulted in anything? No. People have been happy to take my expertise, but ultimately just about every single one of them have said, oh, well, that's great. I'll take what I've learned from you at no charge and do it myself next time. They'd never come to me and say, hey, seeing you did such a better job for me, can I hire you? If they do hire, and sometimes they do hire, they go and hire someone who's not me. So my fear encourages me to put my work out there to be seen and to be heard, but it doesn't win me anything, which is part of why, despite saying I've been pulling back on videos, I've been doing these, but I'm doing them actually far more for myself than I am really for anyone out there. If anyone out there gains from this, great, but I know that most people who watch this or even think they've gained from something from this will return nothing. So the only reason that most people are actually doing any of this stuff is fear. They can try and justify it as positive fear. Oh, but I'm making the world a better place. I'm helping other people. No, I'm making this video just to help myself. Because other people who need help don't want help. And that's a sad, sad statement. So what do we do? What do I do? We got to fight the good fight. Thank you, Triumph. Well, the first thing we got to do is be calm. Because whilst we're all living in a paranoid personality gripped by fear, in our society that's a big fishbowl, just tossing us out there to be eaten by everybody and ignored, we can't get anywhere. So this is part of my process of trying to let this out and be calm and go, okay, well, what is worth it? Where do I get value in return? If I'm going to put the effort in, where do I get value in return? We've got to know the red flags of what fear says. Yes, there's a good side of fear. Don't stick your head in a lion's mouth. Especially if you've got a stake in your hand. It probably isn't going to work out well for you. Don't stand in front of buses. It's probably not going to work out well for you. That's the good side of fear. But knowing the red flags, obviously in people that you deal with, but also in yourself. Like where I'm looking at that stupid not job. And to know the red flags in myself where I go, well, just nothing, Benedict. You're an idiot for following this. And I say that in a positive way of recognizing it. We've got to recognize how fear is controlling us. We've got to then learn not to fight ourselves. Now, I fought myself. I gave myself justifications why following that job and wasting time on it was a good thing. Including, well, it feels good to be mixing. Yes, it did feel good to be mixing. It feels good to take heroin too, I understand. But it rarely works out well for people. Just about everybody who takes heroin has had a more limited existence than they could or should have. Some people will say, but it's allowed me to have the success I've had. Maybe. But chances are you could have done better if you'd actually overcome the heroin monster. The causes for why you think you need heroin before you can be successful. Before you can let out your muse. I have to have heroin before I can let out my muse. Then it's not really you, it's just the heroin speaking. So you've got to learn to recognize the red flags and then learn not to fight yourself. I fought myself here and I gave myself reasons and, well, the fear won. I fought the Benedict and the fear won. That's what happens every time. I fought the Benedict and the fear won. The fear will always win because it's sneaky. When you fight yourself, you can only lose because you split yourself into two. And fear is better at this than you are, the conscious you, simply because you haven't trained the conscious you to be better at it. And the fear sneaky side means that we have to put things logically. So if we go right back to our cave person example, look, even there I have to call them cave persons. How stupid is that? Gripped by fear of a society that says if I don't refer to people in a genderless fashion, bloody hell. Caveman, that's the term, mankind. It's not person kind, it's mankind. So our caveman example, yes, sure, sticking your head in a lion's mouth, especially when you get a raw steak in your hand, is stupid. That's good fear. But bad fear is saying, I will avoid all lions and tigers by staying in my cave. I will be a dead caveman, as will be my dead cave family. So there's no way to justify that level of fear. So we've got to be logical. We have to apply logic. In that example, with the caveman, it's simple logic. Yeah, the longer you stay in here, the greater chance you have of being dead until it is 100% dead. You have to go out there because rabbits don't walk into this cave. There is no Star Trek food replicator that's going to magically appear, no matter how much you pray for it, to gods who might or might not exist. I'm not getting in on that one. You've got to do your shit. And even talks about that in the Bible. I should imagine every Bible or philosophical system says you've got to do your half of this. But you've got to watch for sneaky side of fear, which will try to justify all these other things. And, as I say again, we've got to watch for the fact that our society encourages the fearful thinking. I mean, it's part of the nature of humans, but we live in a kind of a special dark age at the moment, which encourages the paranoic personality, the special snowflaking thing, which allows us to hide behind the craziest, most insane, illogical fears and justify them as being right because we've got a flag in which to wave. Watch out for the sneaky side. The only way to deal with that is not to fight it. I'm going to do better, I'm going to fight to be better. No, is simply to say, thank you. I mean, that's fair argument that there are lions and tigers who might well eat me when I go outside to try and find a wabbit for dinner. this is good. I'm going to be a little bit careful, keep my head on a swivel, take my machine gun with me. But ultimately, I've still got to go out. So the logical argument should be enough to win. You've just got to keep quietly applying logic. And if you can't apply logic, it tells me that you're living in fear. The best way to be able to apply logic and move forward is always, and I borrow this from Alcoholics Anonymous, from AA, that 12-step program does work. Not that I've ever used it, but I have read about it several times from several different angles, and it is known to work far better than any other system. And that is, we borrow this, is that be accountable. The reason that I have lots of work is because I'm accountable to my work. If I don't publish, I've got nothing. So I publish. I keep my accountability by having goals. Now, I don't have big goals. I don't have goals that say, well, I'm going to get to such and such an age and I'm going to have solved world peace and be married to Kylie Minogue, because they are stupid goals and I have no real control over those. But I do have goals which I do have control over, which is that I'm going to get them in the morning and I'm going to make my bed. There's a win already. I'm standing up, my bed's made. And I patted the cat in the process because he always wants to be patted. Winning. I then got my goals of, well, I'm going to get this track finished. And I'm going to get this album finished. I don't put a time on it because I know I work quickly. I don't need to put times on it. If you need to put times on it, okay. But if you need to put times on it, then you've got to question why is this an issue? But if you need to put times, okay. But if you're saying, I'm going to make a track a week, then you may well have a problem because you may look at your history and go, I'm a track a year. So that's probably a ridiculous step. That's like me marrying Kylie Minogue as a result of ensuring world peace. Yeah, sounds noble. I can wave a flag about that, one with world peace and the other with Kylie Minogue on it, and I seem like the most noble person in the universe. But I'm guaranteed to fail. So set achievable goals. Then make sure you meet them. If you don't meet them, then look at why. Is it because there really was a tiger outside and you knew it was there because you could see it was there and you could hear it breathing and purring and licking its lips and sharpening its knife and fork? In which case, fair enough. Probably wasn't a good plan to go outside, or you needed another plan, like to throw a rock so the tiger went off looking for the rock in the bushes whilst you sneaked it outside. You've got to actually work with the facts. The other really important part of this, and the thing that most people don't do because society has us gripped by fear and paranoic personalities, encouraging us to separate, like my non-friend there with his non-job. See how he separated himself from everybody else, and he separated all his target of suckers from each other. You need to depersonalize this. Otherwise, I won't be able to acknowledge you. Yeah. Good play, sir. Good play. And the sad thing is it worked. Not just on me, but probably on 50 other people. Whether he walked away with a free song mix, I don't know. He didn't get mine. But there's no win in that, because there was no win in this ever. For anyone. Not even for him, because he hasn't built what he needs, which is partners. No one gets successful in any business without partners. When you buy a Sting record, guess what? It's not just Sting. There's lots of other people. He commonly writes on his record, this record wouldn't exist without all these other people. Because he's an honest and probably reasonable kind of a chap. He's a good artist at least. You need partners. And being accountable means, well, you've got your goals, but your partners should also help you stay accountable to those. And you work with your partners, not against them. That chap was working against any potential partner. He would burn everybody he ever worked with, which he would then justify as their problem, not his. But the reality is he's burning people at such a rate of knots, which is probably why his mum's the only chick who hasn't dissed him. Because there's something really horrifying about that fellow. have partnerships, but make sure you reward those partners. You reward them in part by finishing your shit and shipping it. So in other words, if you're working with somebody and you're doing part of the song or part of the project, deliver your part and then back it up. Don't just deliver your part and walk away. Say, oh, here it's done and I'm going off to do something more cool and exciting. I'm going to dump this on you. That means you haven't actually delivered. You've just assuaged your fear and passed your shit on to somebody else, which is exactly what Idiot Boy up there did. So he's not going to win. His song is not going to be successful because he's got no weight behind him. A rolling stone does gather moss because it gets bigger. And if you're not prepared to allow yourself to get bigger by having goals and provable finished work and partnerships, people who are in your corner, your backline. People without a backline never get anywhere. And partnerships are part of your backline. Like your sound guy says, hey, dude, we need to do a sound check. Hey, dude, I did notice you were somewhat pitchy there when your sound check. Firing that guy for daring say anything, or firing that guy because you don't use auto-tune, just means that you live in fear and you're not respecting your partnerships. A great singer doesn't use auto-tune. Yes, Michael Bubble, I see you, I hear you. And you're not a great singer because regardless of whether you are or aren't a great singer, you use auto-tune. Maybe it helps you sell more records, and I can understand that argument, but you can never go down in history as a great singer because Sinatra was a great singer, Elvis was a great singer, Bob Dylan, Rod Stewart, great singers, no auto-tune. They didn't need it, they emote, they connect. Which brings me to the final bit, which is that people will say, oh, but what does my product need to look like? And they will be saying, oh, but if I want to write trap, or I want to write EDM, or I want to write cold wave. How can you decide to write something, especially like cold wave? It's such a narrow subgenre. That strikes me as fear in action. When I was coming up, I was taken by pop and the rock of the era, what was on the radio. So this is early, mid-80s. And it was broad, from Dire Straits through to, the Pistols. And wilder things than the Pistols, because the Pistols really were like Bay City rollers with a snarky attitude. There wasn't a lot of difference. And that was fine, because the Pistols were great. But wilder things, bands like Suicide or Skinny Puppy. Skinny Puppy, oh, geez, really? Even here, I've name-dropped Front 242. They were pretty out there. And if you actually stop and listen to Tears for Fears, the Hurting album, that is like, whoa. And nobody's equaled it. All these drippy covers with every single one slower and more turgid than the one before. They all miss what that record's really about, because that's like, it's amazing. It's a pop record. It's more emo than any of the emo shiz that they're trying to do afterwards. It's like, she's really, it's like, it's not boiling your bunny, it's nuking your bunny. Literally, bits of bunny everywhere. And of course, Alice Cooper, just about all of his songs are really like, oh, hang on. Once you get into them, it's like, he's a smart guy who's, really peeling back a lot of onion layers. So what should you be doing? This was the title of the Gena Green article. What should you be doing? And the thing is, you should be stopping the idea of subgenres. You're going to do what you're going to do. Your voice is going to present what it is designed to present. If you're doing subgenres because you think they're successful or because you think they're cool, okay, I started out in a different place than where I am now. Go through my catalogue on Bandcamp and go right down the bottom and you'll find the collection. Start with Plastic Anger because that was where I started. And you'll hear a form of EBM. Angry stuff, me shouting, distortion, clanging pipes, all kinds of stuff like that. Cool. I was driven, that was the thing, I had to do that. But there was always something else underneath me that was like, oh, no, I need to do. And when you listen to, if you spent the real time listening to what I was doing with the EBM, I was always just creating atmospheres. I was creating scenes in which a story played out. I ensured that they all seemed rather dark. But if you listen to songs, say Mental Violence, which is all like grindy and It's very uncomfortable. It was meant to be uncomfortable, but then suddenly, at the bit where there should be a screaming guitar solo, it goes strings and weird. I didn't know how to do better, but why did I choose that path rather than more ugly noises? And that's the path I chose in almost every situation. That was my voice trying to come out. I had anger, but I also had this other thing. I wanted to present that in a really different kind of a way. It was always there. And as I let that happen more and more, I got more settled with who I am. So while I'm still intrigued by EBM and metal, is that where my voice lies? Probably not. I had somebody starting to talk about, and I never heard from him again, about releasing some of my old metal. And so the question comes up in me is like, can I do that again? And I was like, well, I don't know. I'd give it a go. But ultimately, I think it's going to be far more of a Benedict thing than a, wow, this sounds like Cannibal Corpse sort of thing. And that's a good thing because as an artist, if you want the world to know you, because that's really the only good reason to do this stuff, then you have to show you. So if you start out saying, I'm going to do certain subgenre, and go out looking for YouTube videos of how to do exactly that subgenre, you're not going to be learning how music works. You're not going to be learning how self-expression works. Matter of fact, why should you even need to learn how self-expression works? You should just do it. Which brings me back to, in the mid to late 80s, as I was growing up, there was a ton of alternative music, like tons of alternative music, and audiences were really open to it. Not all audiences, but so much that was on top 40 were actually alternative bands who'd worked out how to get on top 40. Thompson Twins, they're an alternative band. Europe, they were a prog band. The record label weren't signing them as a prog band. They were just like, we can't sell this. Go do something that's more saleable. Saleable, but they were a prog band. You start that way. Europe got noticed. Thompson Twins got noticed. And if you really sit down and listen to particularly the early Thompson Twins records, but even the later ones, there is something very left field about what they're doing. And start out being incredibly alternative. Start out allowing yourself to be incredibly raw. Because if you start out by saying, I've got to hide in the fishbowl of perfectedness, you've set an impossible goal. You can't achieve that. Because A, you don't have the experience, B, you don't have the money. And C, you don't have the experience to give yourself the money. Invest in delivering what you can. And if that means that you are shouting at a brick, okay, great. Because if that's authentic, if that's really authentic, it's going to resonate with the right people. And you build from there. Henry Rollins, Black Flag, they were a little too far out for most people. Black Flag weren't really on top of the pops. They weren't the Ramones even. But Henry Rollins has charted an incredibly good course, including now being very accessible by very mainstream hipstery kinds of blokes. They're like, oh, Rollins, yeah, I watched the Rollins show. And now they're Black Flag fans and what have you. You've got to take your time to get there. And you can't get there if you aren't accountable with goals, which is set achievable goals, which is deliver yourself shouting at the rock now. Not in 4 years' time where you've perfected it so that you are the most amazeballs version of man shouts at rock or trap rock shouting subgenre. Deliver it now. Work with people who'll get you there. If your art is shouting at the rock, like Yoko Ono, then do that. Be good at it now. Your art doesn't mean that you have to be a mix engineer, so partner with a mix engineer. And if you're not prepared to partner properly, like Idiot Boy up there, then expect nothing. Expect to fail. Build partnerships that work, where you pay back at least as much as what you have given. So when you post your Man Shouts at Rock record, it's very clear. Produced and mixed by Benedict Roff-Marsh. And when you post it on YouTube and FaceSpace and what have you, that you're actually thanking. Thanks to Benedict Roff-Marsh, we wouldn't have gotten there without him. Remember, this is what Sting does. Sting makes more money than you and I every second. And he thanks his peeps. He thanks his backline. That's a way that you can pay people. If you don't do that, you're like idiot boy up there. You've not got realistic goals and you've not got yourself accountable to anybody or partners. That is the path that you should be taking, and forget the idea of going into the fishbowl of Spotify. Remember what happens to all the fish that go in the fishbowl? They get eaten. Spotify is there to eat you. It is not there to help you get successful. It is there to eat you. That whole system, the society that has us gripped by fear, wants us this way. And I don't want to get into that as paranoia. Go watch Russell Brand if you want that kind of stuff. He's very funny and good at that sort of stuff, although I worry he's starting to maybe sell out a little bit and learn how to make money out of it rather than, but good on him. Forget this paranoid personality stuff. Work on just being you. Work on being unique. Alice Cooper is unique. There is no contender for Alice Cooper. Do that. Allow it to be raw. Have your goals, deliver on them, and work with partners so that you're accountable to them, so that you get stuff done, and that they want to be in your corner. That's your pathway forward. If you would like to hire me or want to read any of those articles, link is below. You have a great day now.